Hey there, and welcome back to the Hidden Why podcast. This is episode 1126, my interview with Jenny Valentish, and we're discussing her newest book, The Introvert's Guide to Leaving the House. What a cool conversation this was. Just very conversational. We share both our experiences as being an introvert and how to navigate the social spaces and interactions that we have and sometimes often avoid for the fear of feeling awkward or being judged or whatever it might be. So Jenny is a reformed, as she'd call it, reformed sociophobe, and she talks about her experiences and the tools that she's tapped into to help her become now a public speaker, better able to manage social environments, social situations, whilst still being an introvert at heart. So really cool conversation, and I think it's one that you definitely tap into, whether you're an introvert, an extrovert, omnivert. She mentions a few others in here as well. I think this one's got some gold for you today. So again, guys, check it all out at thehiddenwhy.com. Show notes, links to Jenny, everything is there for you. And if you'd like to connect with me, always available to chat on Instagram, Facebook, or you can connect through the website there as well. Let me know what you think of this conversation with Jenny after you have a listen. Thanks for tuning in. Hey Jenny, welcome to the Hidden Why podcast. Great to have you with us today.
Thanks, Lee. Very happy to be here.
This is a pretty exciting conversation.
Especially for me, because this is actually my first to talk about this book.
Oh, is it?
So this
there
is
you go.
a testing ground.
I'm happy to be the testing ground. So the book is called The Introvert's Guide to Leaving the House. And this is,
right.
I guess, from your experience as an introvert. And what do you call it? A sociophobe?
Yeah, well, I call myself a reformed sociophobe. But yeah,
Reformed sociophobe.
it's a book for people with social anxiety. It's a book for standoffishes, awkwards, stuck-ups. People who just need a bit of warming up if they're going to be social.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic and one that I can definitely relate to. I'm sure a lot of people listening can relate to. I'm a introvert, as many people wouldn't think that, but certainly that's something that I've had to really work hard at. So let's start there. Let's talk about what is an introvert and how would I recognize if I'm an introvert or not, other than doing some of the Myers-Briggs tests and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's a good question because even some close friends have said to me, "But you're not an introvert." And I'm thinking, what? So it's not as obvious as people might think. I think people assume an introvert is someone really shy. They might be sort of stammering. They might be very bookish, and those things can be true. But actually, so introverts make up about, it's an estimated 25 to 35% of the population. And the best definition I've heard is it's people who their social battery is drained when they're in the company of other people
Hmm.
and it recharges when they're on their own. Whereas extroverts need other people around to really charge up their batteries. So I
Right.
think that's a really great metaphor. And so an introvert can actually flourish really well doing something like podcasting, for instance, because you're calling the shots. You're prepared. You've got a very clear role. So it's not like the dreaded small talk where we might
Right.
really kind of we might
Yeah.
really we might struggle with that. Or, situations where you've really got to understand the social etiquette of it. We know what we're doing here. I know what I'm doing as a guest. You know what
Right.
you're doing as a host, and we can prepare for it. So we can do very well at this.
Yeah. What so as an introvert, what did you recognize in your life that made you obviously write a book and become a reformed sociophobe and really get out of that space? I mean, you're still obviously an introvert, but you've just got the
Mm.
tools to manage that.
Yeah, and to be clear, there's nothing wrong with being an introvert. It's just a
No.
personality type. I
Would you
mean,
say
there's intro
25% of the population are introvert?
25 to 35 estimated different studies.
Yeah, right. I mean,
It doesn't mean everyone else is an extrovert because there's actually also omniverts and amniverts.
cool. What's an
So
omnivert and amnivert?
an amnivert is somebody who's pretty much half and half.
Right.
So they're in the middle. And an omnivert is someone who might swing wildly from being introverted to extroverted, depending on what the situation is or how they're feeling.
Mm.
So for those people, it's not fixed, but for people like you and me, it is pretty fixed. Like we've probably recognized that we're introverts our whole lives. So for me, that looked like when I was a very small child, like a toddler, my mum would try and, she'd make time to play with me, but I wouldn't be interested because I'd be engrossed in doing something on my own.
Yeah.
So she jokes, it was like I had to book an appointment with you to get any to get any bonding time in. And then growing up, I just was a very imaginative child who could retreat inside their head, would go into a complete zone when reading a book. Um, and
Yeah.
then did reach some difficult points where I became more sort of socially isolated in my teens. That can be a thing that happens. And then I got really into alcohol because that made me feel like I could socialize, like I had the almost had the guts to
Put
socialize,
down
if
the
you like.
barriers.
Yeah. So a bit of preloading, as they call it, before you go and meet your friends, which is, just drinking before you go out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then drinking too fast when you're out, so you can feel comfortable just sitting there across the table with someone. I feel I don't have an alcohol problem now, but I still feel um, uncomfortable if I have face-to-face meetups for too long, which is, like maybe you might meet a friend for a coffee or you might meet friends for dinner. And that kind of prolonged sitting in one spot across a table from someone still makes me feel quite antsy, which is why I think introverts are great, much better at shoulder to shoulder activities. And that could be anything from
Right.
going
Not
for a
face to
walk.
face. Yeah.
Yeah, because then you're not dead on having to make eye contact the whole time. You're just doing something together. Like you might be going for a walk, playing pool, going to a gallery,
Mm.
even driving, something where the pressure's off to really be switched on and engaged with that person, but you're with them and you're doing things with them that you can experience together.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you think
Gotcha.
does that apply to you? Like if you're hanging out
Yeah.
with friends?
Absolutely. Yeah, the face to face, I'd rather be doing something with them rather than sitting there face to face. Can be
Yeah.
quite uncomfortable.
Yeah. I think men are actually more switched onto that than women because the men's shed, that
Hmm.
organization. Yeah, well, their slogan is basically based around shoulder to shoulder activities. So I think men more naturally would go out and play pool, for instance, or something, whereas women might sit up for a coffee, meet up for a coffee and sit
Yeah.
across from each other and get the update on what's going on in each other's lives, which can be intense.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so you obviously recognize this and then went into research mode and just figured out how to get over it and pushing yourself out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, introverts have to sometimes put themselves out of their comfort zone. Things like going to parties. Like I've got a chapter called How to Hit a Party Like a SWAT Team. So
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
tooling you up with things for every possibility. Where are the little nooks and crannies where you can just retreat to for a second if you need to recharge your batteries, your social battery, that is. Um, get there early so that um, it's not overwhelming for you walking into a big group of people. You can get there early, get comfortable, and getting there early also means you can leave early, you know?
Yeah, I always find that actually getting to places early, it just freaks me out to get somewhere late, which
Yeah,
is sort of become a
everyone's
good
going to turn
thing.
around.
Yeah, that's right. Well, like you
And
said,
also,
to get comfortable in the situation too.
exactly. And also you could you could help set up or you could otherwise give yourself a role. I think having a role is so good for people with social anxiety and or people who are introverts because
Hmm.
we're not that good at milling. We're not that good at milling around and making small talk. So if you have a role, even what just in your head, like, okay, I'm going to be the person who's going around seeing if anyone needs their drink topped up, or I'm going to look out for people who are even more nervous than me and go and check on them,
Yeah, yeah,
just any kind of role where you can imagine you're pulling on a high vis vest, because as we know, people who are wearing high vis vests, we just assume that they're allowed to do anything. They're almost invisible to us, but we just grant them this authority. So just imagine you're wearing a high vis vest in these social situations where you're like, oh, I shouldn't even be here. And then you feel like,
really good
no, I should be
strategy.
here.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Is there a difference between like shyness and being an introvert?
Yes. I mean, I think more introverts are shy than extroverts for sure.
Yeah.
But if you're an introvert, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're shy. I mean, I went through periods of shyness in my past, probably in my teens, when my self-esteem had taken a hit for different reasons, but I wouldn't call myself shy now at all.
What would you
I
say the
just,
difference is between like those two things, being an introvert and being shy?
well, I think it goes back to that battery metaphor, really. Like if
Right.
you need to recharge your battery by being alone, that makes you an introvert, whereas being shy is, probably having a pronounced fear of judgment. What are people thinking of me? I shouldn't be here. It's really more based around self-esteem and fear of other people and social situations, the fear of the
Right.
unknown as well. I think the final chapter of this book is called "Are You a Control Freak?" which sounds a bit rude, but it's really I recognize that some introverts and shy people feel like they need to control every variable of a situation to feel confident that they'll cope.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can apply, your learnings from the book to many different situations, right? So whether it's going to a social event or doing something online or those one-to-one meetings or even working in a team.
Yeah, yeah, there's a few chapters about work, how to be a team player, advice on how to manage staff, which is a bit hellish if you're not a confident person. Um, Even a chapter on how to talk on the phone. I interviewed this phone coach called Mary Jane Copps, and her job is literally to give people the confidence to talk on the phone. Either they're like Gen Z and they just haven't even had to do that before, or perhaps they're salespeople, but they're just lacking in a bit of confidence. So it's
Yeah.
all about listening, really active listening, and hearing the needs of the other person, which is uniformly great for introverts. Like if you are worried that you're being judged or you're in a spotlight, just flip it and think about the needs of the other person. It takes you out of your own head, takes your own focus off yourself, which is you just getting in your own way,
Yeah.
and gives you a bit more control over the situation. Okay, what does this other person need?
Hmm. Where would we start with this process of overcoming our social anxiety and awkwardness in crowds or in one-on-one meetings? Would it be, at home through meditation or
I haven't really tackled meditation here, actually. I'm not a meditator myself.
yeah,
It's more identifying your own boundaries and kind of swapping X for Y. So if I'm not prepared to do X yet, then perhaps I could do Y. So for instance, every year I go back to the UK to see my family, and we have a really intensive week where we go to a seaside town. So for an introvert, much as I've missed them, and I'd like to hang out with them, that's a lot of social time, an entire week in your entire family's company. And I would find myself constantly making excuses. They're all going to the beach hut, for instance, and I'd be like, oh, I've just got to go back to the house and get something. I've just got to do this because I needed me time.
recharge? Yeah.
Yeah. So then I thought about it and I thought, okay, well, going to the beach hut is a face-to-face activity, isn't it? You're just sitting there, maybe having a coffee is a bit of a distraction, but you're just sitting there making conversation. So if I feel uncomfortable doing that, which is X, maybe I can swap it for Y, which is later. I know we're all going to be playing board games. That's a brilliant shoulder to shoulder activity.
Yeah.
It's more casual. We're doing something. The chat is more natural. It flows more organically. So I stopped beating myself up about things I wasn't comfortable with and just thought, okay, well then, if I'm not going to do that, I will commit to this.
Right. So choosing sort of what you'll commit to.
Yeah.
Do you like being an introvert? I think it's hard to describe this, but I'll try my best. There's things that I want to do, but I'll avoid doing it because of that social awkwardness or whatever it might be. And then there's other things that I think I want to do, but I don't actually want to do. So how do you recognize what you're talking, you know what I mean? Like you're talking yourself out of doing things.
What's the thing that you might think you want to do, but that you don't want to do?
Well, like let's say going to a networking event or something like that.
Yeah,
So that sounds really cool, but then I sort of go, oh, but do I want to be involved in all of that? And I'll
yeah,
tell myself a different story and go, okay, maybe I don't want to do that. Even though maybe at the heart I do want to do it, right?
yeah. Do you find that you enthusiastically say yes to things because it's months and months away? And then as it gets closer and closer, you're like, oh my God, why did I say yes to this? I know I hate doing this. Does that happen quite often?
Yeah, not so much anymore because I've got my sort of defined boundaries now, but back in the day,
Right.
definitely.
So you just say
Um,
no now.
well, I'll say no, or yeah, just make sure it's definitely a connection that I want to do before I
Yeah.
commit to it. Because I've found in the past, yeah, I've often overcommitted, and I'd say yes
Mm,
to a lot of different things, and that drained me. Like, I was needing to recharge and just never gave myself that time.
mm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think in life, like if speaking gigs and things like that, like if I commit to that, I still have a moment of freak out when I first commit.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
that's a separate thing. Yeah, the public speaking. But I mean, with things that you've agreed to do, um, my main thought is if you've committed, fully commit.
yeah,
Like, don't cancel. You've committed. Go into it just with the idea that you're going to make the most out of this situation possible. So it could
mm,
be that you meet, either your new best friend or an incredible contact tonight. And if you didn't go, that wouldn't happen. And if you don't fully commit, that won't happen.
mm.
So once you've said yes to something, don't entertain that nagging voice in your head saying you could back out. You don't have to go. You could make an excuse. Fully commit, and know that whoever invited you there really wants you to be there, and go in wearing that armor,
Yeah,
and that kind of confidence in yourself.
yeah, true. And I find more and more now that, if I commit to something, then I commit to it. And that's just a practice of integrity, really.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, in the past, I might have pulled the pin on things, and I assume a lot of people will do that still.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I'm sure you've had events before, like you've put on an event or a party or something. Like I've got my book launches coming up. And on the actual day, you just get a flurry of text messages from people making their apologies. I think more than ever, actually. I think that happens more than ever post-pandemic. And you're just like,
yeah,
yep, 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 knew that was going to happen. Yep. So it would be nice to remember that next time we're thinking of not turning up and remember how that feels for us and just commit and go.
it's like having a bit of empathy there, isn't it, really?
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
thinking
Because we
about,
tend to think, oh, they won't notice if I'm not there, but I think they will.
yeah, yeah. It's a good mindset thing too, because often you sort of think, who wants me there? Like, what's my value in this situation?
Yeah,
Or what am I going to deliver? Or, you know, there's a lot of things that go through our mind, but we don't actually think about the other side of it.
yeah,
What could I receive from actually going to this? And I often find that myself and other people that I know that they're reluctant to do things, but once they're there and once they finish it, they're just like, that was amazing, and they really enjoyed the experience.
yeah.
But yet they were almost tempted to just put it off.
Yeah, I think, you just mentioned you might be asking yourself, what's my value here? Well, while you're asking yourself that question, answer it and think about actually, this is my value and this is what I can bring. And make sure that you're the most valuable player there, as they say in gaming when you go. Just bring your absolute A game and fully commit.
Yeah. So what do you do in the lead up to social events? We've discussed a few things that you can do to help you sort of get the courage to go through with it. But one-on-one conversations, or one to a group conversations, quite awkward for introverts, right?
Mm,
What are the tools you have to help us cope with that? Because you said something earlier about, or maybe I read it, about making small talk and having a role. Like this is deep, sort of meaningful conversations for me. It's not small talk.
yeah,
And when everyone says like, oh, why don't you like social situations as much? I'm just like, well, the small talk just frustrates me.
yeah.
So that's something that sort of resonated with me. But how do we overcome that? And I like the idea of putting on a role, so saying that you have a role, and then sort of living into that.
Mm. You know what? On Reddit, there's a subreddit called social skills, and it feels like almost every single post is like, oh my God, how do I make a conversation? So it's something people are really, really worried about. So I do have a chapter in the book called Turning Small Talk into Bigger Stuff. And it's about how to mine for those more meaningful connections. So I think having a real genuine sense of curiosity about the other person or people is vital. Like if you don't care and you're just making conversation because you're supposed to, because the main event hasn't started yet, then you're never going to scratch the surface and you'll never find out the interesting things about them. You'll assume that you've got nothing in common, and you won't get those deep connections. So I almost like to suggest gamifying it, where it's your sort of private game that you've got to find out the most interesting thing about this person that you possibly can.
Yeah.
And that means having a sense of curiosity, like really listening to their answer and then trying to go in a bit deeper without being, weird and intrusive. But once you ask a question that you sense sparks something in them because it's related to their main interests, then that's when you know, okay, this is what makes that person tick. Let's go a bit deeper into that. So, eventually you want to be bringing whatever it is that they're passionate about out of them, but not just asking questions relentlessly, because I think sometimes we do that when we're socially anxious just to keep the spotlight on the other person. So we don't want to reveal things about ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think people pick up on that.
Yeah.
So it's a conversation, right? So
Interesting.
you've got to
Yeah.
give back.
I can relate to that. Um, when you're in a social situation and you're talking to someone, I don't know if this is true, but are introverts generally better listeners
They
to an
definitely
extent?
seem like better listeners because they're probably less willing to, as I just said, divulge things about themselves. So they
Yeah.
will seem to intently listen. I think we are as well, though, because we're always trying to make sense of the world. Um, we hang back a bit and sort of observe a situation.
Hmm. I sort of feel that they might be better listeners, but at the same time, in my personal experience, whilst I believe I'm a good listener, often I'm up in my head thinking about, oh, how is this situation playing out? How am I looking?
Yes.
How are people judging me? Those sort of thoughts come up, and then that distracts me from actually the interaction, right?
Oh, you're so right. Yeah. Um, so many times I might have had a reasonably long conversation with somebody, and then I might meet them again a week or a month later, and I don't recognize them, which is crazy. But it's because my mind has been so busy monitoring myself. What are my responses to them? Am I being
It's
correct?
funny,
Is
isn't
this
it?
acceptable? Yeah, that the conversation and the person themselves doesn't even sink in.
Hmm.
So if we can
How do we
recognize
avoid
that we're
that?
doing that,
Hmm.
again, it's that thing of flipping to the other person's needs. So,
Hmm.
so being really present in the conversation, trying to make sure that's happening, recognizing if we're retreating into our heads and monitoring ourselves more than what they're saying. And then thinking about them and what they need, like, oh, look, I can see their eyes lighting up at this bit. This means they're really interested and passionate about this bit.
Yeah.
Or, just kind of mirroring back at them what they're saying. If you're at a loose end, you can always sort of paraphrase what they're saying, and that sort of drills into your head what the conversation is about, while they feel very seen and heard as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people like to talk about themselves, right? So it's easy to have a childlike curiosity and ask questions that delve deep into them,
Yeah.
um, which is cool. And I think that's a really good strategy, but being mindful of obviously your own thoughts and um, how actively you are listening.
Yeah,
But
because there's a thing called the spotlight effect.
right.
And it's one of a number of egocentric biases. And as you can imagine from the name, the spotlight effect is when we imagine that there's a spotlight on us. Everyone's paying way more attention to us than they actually are. Not only that, but whatever we're doing or saying is then influencing their thoughts, their behavior, their actions. So we're in this kind of feedback loop with ourselves where we're convinced that, you know, all attention is on us, but in a quite a negative way because we're fearful of judgment. So I think the first step is to recognize if that's happening with you and then
Mm.
acknowledge, is that realistic? Why would they be? Have they not got their own shit going on? So once we realize, oh, okay, this has actually got a name, spotlight effect. It's an egocentric bias. Lots of people have it. It's not real. I think
Right.
that can help.
What sort of feelings do you have in that moment when you feel like you're in that, what do you sort spotlight effect?
I think I've never heard of a positive spotlight effect. I mean, maybe a narcissist has one, but I mean, for most of us, that means we are being judged, we're being watched, analyzed, and it probably comes from, I mean, it would come from childhood. So it would come from a critical voice that you've had in your past, be
Mm,
it a parent or otherwise, and we've internalized that,
yeah.
and we're now being our own helicopter parent, you know.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we're really getting in our own way, and we're getting in the way of a good conversation.
Yeah. I've had moments, and not often, but every now and then it'll just be this moment, and I don't know what happens, but it's like the spotlight effect. Like suddenly all the
Mm,
attention's on me, and I actually do have this like feel like hot flushes that run through the body and
yeah.
experience that. Have you experienced something like that?
It's more for me, I might physically start holding myself in a more defensive way. So, I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh, yeah,
when I
that
say
too.
holding, I mean, adopt a posture that's I'm more crossed over my own body.
Yeah.
You've got these barriers up. When do you tend to find it happens?
I'll try to analyze this, and I don't know if there's any specific, but it's generally when everything suddenly attention's on me from a
Yeah,
group of people. And there's that moment of just awkwardness. And I've
yeah,
tried to think about it, and because I'm aware of it, obviously I can recognize it and move through it fairly easily now. But
yeah,
when that first happened, I was just like, geez, that's weird. Because it really made me sort of go hot and sweat a bit and put up different body language as well.
mm.
Um, yeah.
Well, my partner's a really super confident extrovert, and so he
No.
doesn't have that at all. But he'll say to me that, you know, people are generally rooting for you. Like, let's
Yeah.
say you've got to address a few people. They just want the information and they want you to impart it well.
Yeah.
And if they ever see you struggling a bit, they're most likely going to be thinking, "Come on," you know,
Yeah.
in a
Supporting it. Yeah.
encouraging way. Yeah. So people are just there to get information, whether it's a small talk conversation or whether you're on the stage. Um, they're there to get value, so they're not there specifically to watch you squirm like like a bug under a pin. That's not what they're there for. So we just have to remember that they're there for information and also try and imagine people have your best interests at heart, I think helps.
Yeah. I think it can make you feel or seem a bit arrogant because of that reason, right? Because you sort of just shut down and then people are just, like you said, they're just wanting more information from you, but you've then
Yeah.
just put up a barrier because it's somehow, I don't know, too vulnerable or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I've got in the tagline for the book, it says solid advice for introverts, sociophobes, standoffishes, and awkwards. Because I think anyone who's got social phobia will worry that they have seemed standoffish at some point because they're not as open. They're not necessarily, their resting face probably isn't going to be a welcoming smile, right?
Hmm.
There's all sorts of things going on in their head. So their resting face is probably going to be slightly, maybe even a slight frown. So I think, yeah, the idea that
I've been
people
accused of
might
that.
think, yeah, the idea that people might think we're arrogant is quite valid
Yeah.
because it's that closed off guardedness that people can mistake for arrogance, but we know it's not.
Hmm. Any tools that you can help people get through, moving beyond themselves? And like you said, just focus on the needs of the other people. But are there
Mm.
any deeper tools that we can use to help us? I really think it boils down to having a high level of self-awareness so that when you're facing that, you are better able to respond in those situations rather than react, which is what you'd typically do if you weren't so self-aware.
Well, yeah, it really boils down to mindfulness, doesn't it? Where it's all about recognizing the thing that you're doing, acknowledging it, maybe even thanking it, and then trying to reset in a more sort of in the moment um, vibe, if you like. So
Mm,
we're constantly, if we do find ourselves behaving in one of the ways we've described, it's acknowledging it and then trying to like actively listen again and
yeah.
actively be there and actively experience. What about with public speaking, being on a stage, being on a mic? How do you go with that?
It's something that I actually really enjoy doing. But yeah, it's something that scares the heck out of me. But like anyone, everyone I hear, even the ones that I admire, they say they still have anxiety post speaking. But I sort of relate the two, because you're in a role when you're asked to speak, and so you've got this defined role, um, and it comes somewhat a bit easier with that compared to a social situation.
Yeah.
You find the same thing?
Exactly. Yeah, I used to avoid it like the plague. So I used to edit magazines. I edited
Right.
Triple J's magazine and
Well,
also Time Out, which is a city guide.
yeah,
And I made all sorts of excuses to never go on the radio, never go on TV, and never go on stage. And I
look at you
remember,
now.
yeah, I remember our food and drink editor at Time Out had to host these annual awards that we did. And I was going to her, God, I don't know how you do it. And she said, Oh, it's so much easier than small talk, which made me think,
Yeah.
okay, interesting. But for the first few times I had to go on stage, it was super awkward. My mouth did get really dry. My throat did close up. I did speak quite robotically. I felt that people could probably see my heart moving my shirt. I was
And could they?
sweaty. I don't know if they could, no, but they would have heard my voice running out of air,
Right.
like when you're super nervous.
Yeah.
So it took practice, but also I said to my doctor this was going on, and she sent me to some social anxiety meetups where we
Right.
had to like read in front of each other and then rate how nervous we were. But I remember
Hmm.
halfway through, this is about 15 years ago, we all went out for a cigarette because all of us were smoking at that point
Hmm.
and nervously. And then someone mentioned beta blockers and said, "Oh,
Yeah.
they block your adrenaline. It's not a sedative. They just block your adrenaline. You can't get nervous." And I thought, why are we here then? I went back to the doctor and she said, "Oh yeah, I could prescribe you those if you like." So I just take them for public speaking. I haven't taken them for podcasting because it's one-on-one. You're in a
Bit
screen,
different.
like it's
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
But as a sort of safety net now, even though I've done tons and tons and tons of public speaking
Yeah.
now, I
Okay.
I will take them, and that way I just know I've got nothing to worry about because
I've
it's,
heard
you
I've heard of them and people using them. Yeah. Do you think that because it sort of lowers your adrenaline for the moment?
hmm,
But I was talking to a gentleman last week about this, and as a performer, and he actually learnt how to then use that pre-anxiety
yeah,
to put into his performance rather than let it him, diminish it, if that makes sense.
yeah. Lots of performers say that. Like you want to feel those nerves. And I used to be a fighter, actually. I used to be a Muay Thai fighter. And of course, you're really nervous before that, right? You're in front of a
Shit.
crowd, you might get knocked on your ass and you might get hurt. And I remember one coach saying, "It's not fear, it's excitement. Just keep telling yourself that. It's not fear, it's excitement. I'm really excited." Whenever you think,
Yeah.
"Oh my God, I'm absolutely shitting myself," no, I'm really excited. Can't wait. So
Yeah.
again, that's a bit of a mindset thing, isn't it?
Well, it's the same feelings that run through your body, and it's just
Mm,
how your mind plays with those, like, I suppose.
yeah, like, oh God, I can't wait to get on stage. And certainly, I find that while you are waiting to go on stage, that's the kind of limbo period of, complete nerves. So that by the time it's your turn to walk on stage, you're like, brilliant, and almost on quite a high, I think. And so, yeah, I really, really enjoy public speaking now. I probably don't have to take the beta blockers. I know I've forgotten them here and there, and it's been fine. But it's just doing it again and again, having that role, knowing that people are there to learn. So you're there to say something because you know this information and they don't, and they're so eager to be given that information. Uh, that it's probably the most confident I feel being on stage now, bizarrely.
Yeah. See, I sort of think you can take that mindset and that role into a social situation and apply it there, just like you do when you go up to stand on stage.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. Right at the beginning of this interview, we were talking about, okay, you might go to a party and you're going to be the drinks facilitator, or you're going to be the person looking out for people who are really struggling. That's the same thing where you walk in like, oh, I've got a clear role here.
Hmm.
Nobody else might know because you might not have told them, but you know what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love that idea. I think it makes a lot of sense. What else can you share from your book that you really just found quite interesting through your work here?
Um, I think the idea of conflict is terrifying to
Right.
introverts. So, I think we're worried that my partner absolutely loves getting into conflicts. I don't mean real super aggressive stuff, but for instance, if he's buying something on Marketplace, Facebook Marketplace, and you sometimes get people who are a bit rude, he kind of relishes that. Like, no, I'm gonna wear them down. I'm gonna wear them down. Whereas for me, that's just something that I would try and avoid like the plague.
Yeah.
So I think again, it's about taking that personal element out of it as much as you can. Okay, a conflict is just a heightened debate or a heightened discussion. It's two people thrashing something out. It's not all about you and what they think of you and how they're judging you. You've got to kind of take
Not
that
personal.
aspect out of it. Yeah, and
Mm.
just look at the topic that's being discussed here. Um, and so I've got a whole chapter on handling conflicts, and it looks at things like what hostage negotiators do. There's also, I think, oh God, is it five or seven? I forget, five or seven different types of conflicts, and I go through all those and what they look like and how we can
Yeah.
approach them. Um, and yeah, so it's really about trying to get a resolution rather than this is an attack on me. It's so important to try and reframe that.
Yeah. And look at it from their shoes, have that level of empathy
Yeah.
that can sort of understand why they have their view on this situation as
Yeah.
opposed to your view.
Actually, somebody in the book I interviewed was talking about transactional analysis, and it's where we have three modes. Okay, so each person has the mode of child, adult, parent. And we could, any conversation we have, we're going to be in one of those modes, and the other person is going to be in one of those modes. And so you want to be in the same mode as the other person. And ideally, it's going to
Right.
be adult to adult.
Yeah.
But sometimes that's not the case. So we might suddenly actually think to ourselves, okay, I'm in parent mode here, and I can see they're in child mode because they're reacting quite childishly. That means I'm being quite patronizing. I'm being the parent. We kind of need to switch this and talk adult to adult. It's a very interesting practice and really worth looking into. And the guy who told me about it is a TikTok star called well his name is Milo McCabe, but he
Right.
performs under Troy Hawk. And people might have seen him on TikTok where he's very English, very like Errol Flynn. He wears a purple smoking jacket, and he has a moustache, and he basically goes out into the high streets of the UK and beyond and compliments people with the most beautiful compliments. And it catches them off guard, like it's all filmed, and you see people just respond like, "Oh my God, that was so nice." It's a bespoke compliment where he's singled out something about them, not about their appearance, but like a confident way they walk or the way they've really distributed the carrier bags very nicely that they're carrying, and it'll make them laugh. But it was interesting because he had actually studied transactional analysis. He had been a counselor in a previous life. Um, and he also found out recently that he was autistic. And so having this role, this comedic persona, gave him all this confidence that he
Mm.
needed because people responded to it, and he knew what he was supposed to be doing.
Yeah. What's his name again?
His name is Milo McCabe, but he
Uh,
performs. If you were to look him up, it would be under Troy Hawk with an
Troy
E.
Hawk. Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
hilarious guy.
How does vulnerability play in all of this? And what are your thoughts on being more vulnerable?
I don't know if we need to be more vulnerable. We're pretty
No?
vulnerable. Well, look, you could be more vulnerable in that rather than if you're feeling really socially awkward, rather than just sweating it and shutting down and maybe becoming a bit standoffish, you could just acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, for instance, I think Eckhart Tolle, not sure. He has
Okay.
talked about
Totally. Yeah.
how sometimes he feels incredibly nervous and like people are judging him, but then he'll just name it and acknowledge it, and people respond to that. So I think, if you're in a situation, rather than if you feel like, God, I'm acting weird, rather than get more weird, you could just say, oh, sorry, I'm just finding this situation a bit overwhelming because of X and Y. You know, you know, it can be quite charming to just sort of get a bit meta and say what's going on for you.
Mm. I think sometimes that awkwardness comes from people closing off, being vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
So they're worried about someone seeing some side of them, which is obviously, well, most likely not going to be a bad thing.
Mm.
But for some reason, you just sort of think it might be.
Yeah. So instead we appear cold.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah. So
worse, being sort of warm and vulnerable or cold?
open yourself up a little bit more to the situation.
Yeah.
Um, Tools of courage. Do you find that you have something that gives you courage before going into a social situation, one-on-one speaking?
I think you can give yourself a bit of an alter ego. I mean, if you think of comedians and musicians
Yeah.
from Chrissy Amphlett to, AC/DC, like they've always, okay, they're on stage and we expect them to be larger than life, but they were quite shy, nervous people who thought, okay, I'm gonna have to sort of build a persona here. And that gives them courage. It's like a talisman. And there was an
Mm,
interesting book by a guy called Todd Herman called The Alter Ego Effect.
right.
And
I
he
think I've heard
talks
that.
about this, yeah, where even the simple acts of he used to wear glasses, but they didn't even have, corrective lenses in them. He didn't need them. But the very acts of wearing these glasses kind of imbued him with the sense of, okay, I'm going to be this version of Todd now.
Yeah.
Um,
Like playing
and
into the
so,
role we talked about, really.
yeah, 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 it is. It is playing into the role. It's a bit like Clark Kent,
Mm,
you're kind of by having this talisman or this little prop or this item of clothing, you're kind of entering this, okay, I am this version of myself now. I think that can help as a confidence tool.
yeah, absolutely. I really like that. Congratulations
Thank
on
you.
writing your book. This is your first book.
No, it's my fifth.
Fifth book.
Yeah.
Here you go. Well, you're a journalist, so that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Pumping them out.
So this one, you're getting ready to run around to promote this book. How can people best reach out to you and find out more about the book?
I am mostly active on Instagram, actually. If you go to any of my other social media, it's like a graveyard. So my Instagram is Jenny Valentish _public. And I do lots of skits around social anxiety on
Okay,
that with my very extrovert partner. Um, and also I've got a website, jennyvalentish.com, where you can learn more about the book and the journalism.
great. I'll have to check you out on Instagram. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Guys, check it out, thehiddenwhy.com. All the show notes will be in there. And until next time, peace, passion, and purpose. See you soon. There you have it, my interview with Jenny. Let me know what you thought. You can leave your comments on the show notes here. Obviously, connect at thehiddenwhy.com. Check the show notes out there. The links for Jenny are there as well. Pick up her books if you'd like to have a read of them. But really, lots of gold in this conversation. Definitely lots that I could resonate with. And I'm sure anyone listening can grab onto some of those tools that Jenny talks about in this episode to help you navigate those social situations, whether it's public speaking or gatherings, whatever it might be, to approach them with a lot more confidence moving forward as well. The biggest highlight for me was probably just, selecting a role to play in those situations to help you feel more certain and comfortable about, those social interactions. Really good stuff here, guys. If you are looking to have a chat, reach out to me through thehiddenwhy.com, or you can connect, just PM me on Insta or Facebook, and we can have a bit more of a chat there. I am here to help you live more fully, have more meaning, and find more joy, and certainly would love to discuss any challenges you might be having in life right now and talk to you about how we can align your true self with your goals in life, so you can live a life with greater meaning, fulfillment, and happiness. Have a great day ahead, and thank you so much again for tuning in. Bye.